I want to take the opportunity to say how proud I am to stand with all of the women and all the national organizations in this country as the Senate sponsor of SJ Res 21 in the United States Senate, the Equal Rights Amendment, co-sponsored by 14 of my colleagues and growing. As the senator from New Jersey, the home of Alice Paul, who drafted the original amendment at her lifetime home in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, I'm proud to carry on New Jersey's tradition of being the home base of America's struggle for equal rights for women in our country. We find ourselves, as we celebrate the 40th anniversary of the ERA, having to refight some old battles. And in that respect, all the more reason why having an ERA amendment, part of the Constitution of the United States, undeniable. As I go across the Supreme Court on my way to work every day, it says equal justice under the law. For me, that means equal justice for men and women in America under the law, and there should be no dispute about that. And the way in which we don't have to fight individual fights, as we did with the Lilly Ledbetter bill about pay discrimination and equal pay for equal work, or as we try to do for women under the Affordable Care Act to ensure that just simply being a woman was not a pre-existing condition according to insurance companies that would deny the right for women to have access to insurance, or because they were pregnant saying that that was a pre-existing condition, or charging women double what their male counterparts in the same age group in the same geography were being charged. We shouldn't have to do this piece by piece. We should be very clear that, in fact, the Constitution says that all Americans, men and women alike, are equal under the law and have the protection of those constitutional guarantees. And that's what the ERA is all about. Now, if there was a time, I personally believe that these guarantees are there, but in fact, there are those on the Supreme Court of the United States, like Justice Scalia, who have made comments that equal protection for women, that discrimination based on gender is not covered under the 14th Amendment of the United States. And when you have Supreme Court justices suggesting that if it ever a case came to them on this issue, that they might very well decide that discrimination against women is not ultimately a violation of constitutional proportions, it gives us all the more reason as to why we need an ERA amendment. And when we see the fights that are taking place in the Congress of the United States and the raging debate among some in this country in terms of turning back the clock to a time and place that none of us are going to permit us to go back to, whether it is about a woman's right to choose, whether it is about access to contraceptive services, whether it is about fundamental health care services, whatever the issue is, we have seen those on the far right try to roll back the clock, try to roll back the rights, and that could never happen. We wouldn't even be in the midst of this debate if we had an ERA amendment that made it very clear in the Constitution of the United States that we are protected. And so this is a moment to galvanize a movement to achieve success moving in the House, in the Senate, and then ratification across the landscape of our country. Finally, Alice Paul made it very clear. She said when her mother taught her, when you put your hand to the plow, you do not finish until you get to the end of the road. My mother, when she was alive, who came to this country in search of freedom, is my personal hero, left everything behind to come to a country in which, of course, the status of women at that time was far different than it even is today. She taught me that he who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is not fit for the kingdom of God. We are not going to look back as we continue to pursue this Equal Rights Amendment, and I am committed to this course just as much as my dear late friend Teddy Kennedy was when I joined him in the Senate. I was his co-sponsor then, and I'm proud to be the sponsor now, and we will achieve this for my daughter, for daughters across the country, for women across our nation. It is what we need to do to make sure in this 21st century there is no doubt whatsoever. Thank you so much for being here.
I cannot help but wonder how things might have been different if the ERA had actually been ratified by enough states all these years ago and become part of our Constitution, and how attitudes and treatment and respect towards women would be different simply because it was valued and included in our Constitution. Because if equality had been enshrined in the Constitution for these past 40 years, I wonder if we would still be hearing today from right-wing presidential candidates and contenders that say women should not serve in the military, that women should think twice before they seek to work outside of the home, and that women should not use birth control, and that women who do are called very bad names. We have to ask the obvious, where are the women? I wonder. Right here in Congress, we've had an array of bills that would have a devastating impact on the health and lives of women. Just women, mind you, not men, just women. It's true, most of these would not have been corrected by the ERA, but when attitudes have been so different that no one would have dared to even bring them up. We have had that effort to defund Planned Parenthood, which is a primary health provider for millions of women across our country. We've had that effort to pass the Blunt Amendment that would have outlawed many widely used safe and effective means of birth control. From Montana to Arizona to New Hampshire and Virginia, similar regressive efforts have been proposed or passed, which roll back the privacy between a woman and her doctor, or slash funding for women's health care needs. When you look at these efforts from 10,000 feet, it's a pattern here in Congress and all across the country. And ask yourself if this doesn't smack of as an all-out assault on women's right to make her own health decisions. I think it's time to declare loud and proud that we will not march weakly back to that primitive and dark age. I think it's time to declare that this will be another year of the woman at the polls. I think it's time to stop fighting discrimination against women piecemeal, one small skirmish at a time. And I think it's time to make equality for women not just a slogan, but in a constitutional reality embedded in our Constitution. I think it's time to pass the ERA. Yes. Thank you. It's our 40th year of this round. Let's just not forget, the ERA was introduced in 1923. It has now taken up 2 generations of women's lives. But I can tell you for sure, we will keep this up until it is ratified.
In the late 1960s, when the struggle to pass the Equal Rights Amendment was gathering momentum, I was a single mother with 3 small children, and I was unexpectedly entering the workforce. Lying about my marital status and claiming that I had child care across the street, I got a job. Because you see, employers could ask you those questions then, and they could decide whether or not you were employable. Even though I was working, I was employed, I had to go on public assistance to make ends meet with my very measly paycheck. And I could have used the ERA, let me tell you. My family persevered. We did thrive. We got through it. And without a question, since that time, women have made progress. As a society, we've begun to remedy sexism and gender discrimination, but we have not achieved equality. Far from it. Not by a long shot. Not when women have to work the weekends to earn what a man earns Monday through Friday. Not when the professions that primarily employ women, teachers, nurses, federal employees, and others, are under siege by the Republican budget. Not when reproductive freedom and the right to affordable birth control is under withering assault right here in the United States Congress, right now in the year 2012, right now in the 21st century. It just never stops. Not when Rush Limbaugh can call a college student a slut just for speaking out about women's health. And not when military rape remains one of the biggest threats facing women who are serving our country. In just about every area of public policy, we're regressing when it comes to women's rights. We've been at war in Afghanistan for 10 years. My grandson Teddy, who's here with me today, in Washington, doesn't have any memory of our country not being at war. We're spending at least $10 billion a month on this disastrous, immoral military occupation. Imagine if what would happen if we just invested a fraction of that $10 billion in our families, our children, and working women. Women who work outside the home and women whose primary job is raising their families as well. The bottom line is that the glass ceiling is still firmly in place, and our march toward equality has a long way to go. The other side of the aisle has tried to amend the Constitution in recent years, you know that, to stop things like flag burning. I think it's far more important that we protect the rights of 50% of the population. We need the ERA. Yay! 1972, and we need it today.
And we must end the hypocrisy of advocating for full rights for women in, say, Afghanistan, without providing for the same in the Constitution of the good old U.S. of A. In order for a democracy to thrive, women must have equal rights. They can't be subjected to what Lilly Ledbetter has undergone.
Well, thank you, Carolyn Maloney, for calling us together. I'm from Wisconsin. And Wisconsin was like the 14th or 15th state in the union to ratify the ERA. And we tried to ratify a state ERA, but unfortunately we had female voices like Phyllis Schlafly and others who fought against this ERA. And you know, there is a sort of a cultural memory of that. Now that we have seen all these assaults on women's health in recent times, that there has been a deafening silence of women on this issue from the other side, conservative women. Maybe they talk about it in the quietness, in some quiet room, but there are not many defenders of women's health. I tell you, it's extremely heartening to see the women of all ages, races who are out here today, because we have got to take up the mantle once again. It is too bad that we need an ERA, but we need to take the risk of opening the Constitution, because we see in every aspect of our lives, whether it be health care, whether it be participation in politics, whether we see it being in the workplace, at the lowest levels of the workplace, or in the offices of the CEOs, or whether it be work supports, like being able to find affordable child care. In every instance of a woman's life, at every level, whether it's to get into classes and schools so that we can participate in the new economy with the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, educational opportunities, in every aspect of life. As women, we're behind the curve. And so it's extremely important for us to have this country live up to its creed of equal opportunity for everybody. And over 50% of the population, we need to be heard. And it's extremely important that we not be shy about being a woman. You know, as Sojourner Truth said so many years ago, ain't I a woman?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a woman, and I'm an American woman, and so I deserve to be enshrined in the Constitution of the United States.
40 years ago, on March 22nd, 1972, Congress sent the Equal Rights Amendment to the states for ratification. Actually, I want to note the House passed the ERA on October 12, 1971, and it took the Senate, as usual, a few months to catch up. It is now 40 years later, and we have not yet enshrined in our Constitution the simple, I would say self-evident truth that all Americans are entitled to equality under the law regardless of gender. This is truly an embarrassment. As we gather to mark the 40th anniversary of the ERA in Congress, we should remember that the ERA was actually first proposed in 1923, nearly 90 years ago. And nearly 90 years later, we are still forced to gather and demand its passage. That's a disgrace. It's important for us to understand today that the ERA is not a symbolic issue or an issue for the past. Every day in this nation, women's rights, their dignity, their equality are under fire from all sides. Attacks in the workplace, attacks on their rights to reproductive choice, attacks on their rights to equal health insurance coverage. In all walks of life, the very fundamental principle of gender equality is still under attack. For all these reasons, I am proud to join my friend and colleague and neighbor from New York, Carolyn Maloney, in reintroducing the Equal Rights Amendment, which would provide a clear and unequivocal statement guaranteeing equal rights for women in the Constitution. I want to commend Carolyn for her tireless commitment to this important and historic cause. The text of the amendment hasn't changed. The need hasn't changed. The moral imperative hasn't changed. The time has come again to propose to the states and for the states to ratify the ERA. Thank you.
It's commonly said on my side of the aisle that the Constitution covers this right, this privilege. Well, it doesn't. If it did, you wouldn't be here, would you?
Right.
As a guy with 4 sisters who grew up being supported and beholding to women in my family, I've always felt that the Equal Rights Amendment was something that was appropriate and necessary, and I'm happy to push it on my side of the aisle. And I think that these are very precarious times for women. You see so many of your rights under assault. You shouldn't be footballs in the political theater.
Right.
And you have 51% of the vote. I'll tell you this, contribute your money to people that can speak out on your behalf, because the other side, my side, has a lot of it. And, you need to send your own message. You need to remind people that you vote, you matter, and that they can't succeed without your help. The fact that you want it is evidence that you deserve it and that you need it. And even if it is perfunctory, that doesn't matter to me. If it's something you want, then you should have it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, this is not just about adding a few words, semantics into the Constitution. It is not symbolic. If we ever needed to be reminded of that, today and the last few weeks and months have been a clear reminder of how women still need the Equal Rights Amendment. It was almost 32 years ago today that I was in Illinois, in the Capitol, watching the Equal Rights Amendment under the leadership of Phyllis Schlafly from Illinois go down to defeat. And never did I think on that day in June that 40 years after it was first passed in Congress that we would still be fighting for it. It's hard for me to imagine. Now I have granddaughters that I'll need to explain how they are not in the Constitution if we don't act right now. But it is about ending gender-based discrimination. How about the news that we've all known, that the standard body when it comes to the healthcare system is the male body, and that being a woman is a pre-existing condition, and so we pay more for our health care. We get lower pay in the workshop. We don't get paid family relief. paid family leave, our reduced retirement, our retirement security is reduced because of lower pensions and Social Security benefits. So, you know, I don't have to do the litany. You know it. It's time to fight in every single way right now. We're only 17% of the Congress. We need more women at the table making the decisions. And as Richard pointed out, we are 51% of the voters. Let's vote in favor of the Equal Rights Amendment when we cast our ballot, when we give our money, and thank you, Carolyn Maloney.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you to Congresswoman Maloney for having the courage and the tenacity to reintroduce the ERA every year until we get it done. We will not give up. We will get the ERA one way or another. I have told people over and over again, if we have to get the ERA swinging from the chandeliers, that's the route we'll take to get it. I'm so grateful for all the leaders we have here, Congresswoman Schakowsky. Congressman, thank you for your leadership. Women are only 17% of the United States Congress. That is not okay. Women are only 3 out of 9 Supreme Court justices. And given what the Supreme Court has started doing to women these days, that is really not okay. This year, 2012, needs to be the year of the women. If we had women in state legislatures, in those key legislatures in 1982 when we almost ratified the ERA back then, in Illinois, in Florida, in North Carolina, and in, was it Virginia? Nevada. If we had had women and if we had had people of color, men and women of color, we know that we would have ratified the ERA. We have got to change the complexion of our elected leadership. It starts this year. Women will be voting this year. We've had it. We've had enough. Enough with the war on women. We're going to elect more women to support the ERA. Thank you so much.